Hey guys, Ashley French here, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to do beadboard paneling in your home. I'm in my laundry room and I am using the 4-foot by 8-foot sheets of beadboard. This is sold at your Home Depots or your Lowe's, and the full sheets are the most economical. Now, as I mentioned, these sheets are 4-foot by 8-foot, which is very large. It will not fit in an SUV, obviously won't fit in a car, and sometimes it won't even fit in the bed of some trucks. So an option for you to get these sheets home to your house is to ask your store to cut them for you. That's what I did. Like I said, these come in 8-foot sheets, so I actually asked the employees at my store to cut them down exactly in the middle, which left me with two 48-inch pieces, which is what I have here, and that is the exact height that I planned to do in my laundry room. So with 48 inches, when I get this up on the wall, it's the exact height that I wanted. So the 8-foot sheets, you're gonna get two 48-inch panels. So it really is cost effective, and if you do utilize the store employees to cut it down for you, that just saves one extra step. But there are other options at Home Depot and Lowe's. They actually sell this beadboard in packs of smaller pieces. So depending on your budget and your space and how tall on the wall you want to go with your beadboard, you may consider some of those other options.
This beadboard should work with almost all baseboards. You just simply set it on top. If you are planning on replacing the baseboards, I would recommend doing that before the beadboard.
All right, so before we get started, I did want to point out to you the detail on these panels. So what's really nice is that they are designed to be cut in half and for one piece to butt up to the next piece. And let me tell you exactly what I'm talking about. So as you can see on the beadboard, it has these little ribs in it. And so on this side here, you can see it actually ends, there's a rib right there. And then on this side, it is just flat. And so when I take my second board and butt it up, it's gonna continue the pattern perfectly. All right, so next I wanna talk about the different methods that are available for attaching this beadboard paneling to the wall. So the most common method, in my opinion, is using a brad nailer, which I've got here. So this is my 18 gauge brad nailer. This is what you're going to be seeing me using in this video to attach my boards to the wall. And you can also use the good old-fashioned hammer and nails method, which I'm gonna show you. So these small white nails, these are little finishing nails. You can get these at any hardware store. You can use good old-fashioned hammer and nails to attach your panels to the wall if you don't own some sort of nail gun. This is going to take you longer and it's probably going to be a little frustrating, but it's totally an option if you don't own a nail gun. Okay, so for this project, I am using 2-inch brad nails. These are 18 gauge. I am using an 18 gauge brad nailer. And when it comes to figuring out the inches of your brad nails, what you want to consider is that this has to go through the thickness of your board or the panel, then it has to go through the thickness of your drywall, and then the remainder is what's going to go into the studs of the wall and hold the paneling or the board against the wall. Now, if you're starting to install and you're seeing that portions of your nails are sticking out and not going in all the way, that could be a sign that you need to use smaller nails, and you can try to go down in size by anywhere from a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch. But it is important that your nails are not too small because they have to be able to go through everything and still drive into a stud. To get started, I used my stud finder to locate the studs in the wall and marked them with small pieces of painter's tape above where the beadboard would go.
Then I brought in my first piece of beadboard, set it on top of my baseboard, and drove my brad nails into the previously marked stud locations.
All right, so the first panel is up, and as you can see, I have this gap here. So I am going to have to make a cut on a piece of panel to fit this small space. So all you need is your measuring tape and a pencil. And first I'm going to measure what my gap is here. So it looks like I'm 14 5/8 inch. And so I'm gonna make that measurement on my board and mark it with pencil, but keep in mind, like I mentioned earlier, that I need to make sure the edge of the next panel is going to match the pattern here. So I have a flat piece, and so on my second panel, I'm gonna start with the rib. So I'm gonna make my marking here of 14 5/8.
I decided to use my table saw to cut this panel. Another method which I am showing you here is to measure and draw your cut line with a straight edge and then use a jigsaw or circular saw to cut along your line. Be sure to check out my beginner tools tutorial for an in-depth lesson on how to use each of these saws. The benefit of using the table saw is that I was able to set the fence to my exact measurement before cutting. I brought that panel in, nailed it into place, and continued installing the beadboard around the room. Most homes do not have corners that are a perfect 90 degrees. This will leave you with a small gap either between the door trim in your panel or the baseboard in your panel. I recommend pushing your panel against the door trim and leaving the gap at the baseboard, which will be filled in later with caulk. I did have a window in this room, which meant I needed to cut my panel down to a shorter height. I measured the distance from my baseboard to the bottom of the window, marked this measurement onto my panel, and then used my table saw to cut it down to the correct height. I also had an unusual cut to make around the corner of the window. First, I measured from the cabinet on the right to the edge of the previous beadboard for the total width of the panel. Then I measured up from the top of the baseboard to the underside of the windowsill to identify where the window cutout needs to start. Then I measured from the edge of the previous beadboard to the outside of the windowsill to find out how far into the panel the cutout needed to extend. I made my first cut for the total width on the table saw. Then I marked out the remaining measurements on the panel to identify the area that needed to be cut out for the window. I marked the lines for the cutout and used a jigsaw to cut out this corner. With the panel cut out to fit around the window, I did a quick dry fit to verify everything was snug. Next, we'll make room for the outlet. To start, I remove the screws from the outlet cover while leaving the actual cover loosely in place. Then I take painter's tape and double it back to act like double-sided tape. I attach the tape to the outside edges of the outlet cover. With the tape in place, I put the panel up to the wall and press it firmly into place so that the tape on the outlet attaches to the back of the panel. Carefully remove the panel and the outlet cover will remain stuck to the back of the panel. Then I trace the inside of the outlet cover to accurately lay out where I needed to cut out the outlet. I used a multi-tool to create the outlet opening. You can also use a drill and a jigsaw. Before installing the panel, I turned the breaker off and safely removed the outlet from the wall. Then I put the panel into place and secured it with brad nails. When adding paneling to an existing wall, the receptacle box for the outlet becomes recessed in the wall. To conform with building codes, I added a metal extension ring to bring the outlet box flush with the paneling. It's important to note that if you're not comfortable with electrical, you should consult a professional. With the outlet and cover properly reinstalled, we are ready to move on to the trim molding. For this accent wall, I chose to use 1x4 primed pine for the top trim molding. There are a variety of options available when it comes to this detail. To install your molding, start by taking accurate measurements for all of your cuts. I use my miter saw to make the cuts and then install them using brad nails into the stud location. To finish the accent wall, I fill all the nail holes. I prefer this dry deck spackling because it's easy to work with and dries quickly, so I can sand it shortly after applying. It's easy to apply. Take small dabs on your finger and push it into the nail holes. You can also use wood filler if you prefer. I typically use a 220 grit sandpaper or sanding block. Holding a rag under the area helps minimize the dust and clean up later. To fill all of the larger gaps and seams, I use DAP Alex Flex crown molding caulk with a caulk gun. Make sure that when you cut the tip off the caulk bottle, you don't cut it too large. Doing so can result in a messy application. If you often struggle when applying caulk, you can apply painter's tape on both sides of the seam and remove it after smoothing the caulk out. I apply a bead of caulk to all the seams, corners, and gaps. Remember to move the caulk gun along your seam at a steady pace. And at this point, your accent wall is ready for paint. Since these panels are primed, any interior paint will look great. All right, guys, so there you have it. I am going to be listing the materials and the tools that I used in the description below. If you have additional questions, make sure to just leave those in the comments, and be sure to check out my other accent wall videos. I have several tutorials just like this on my profile, and make sure you subscribe so you can be alerted when my next video gets posted. Bye, guys.